Ooh, the man of tomorrow is ready for your Wednesday Zomia ONE Underground Q&A, coming in hot, though boy, I'll tell you, not as hot as that. Well, I don't know if it was hot. We'll talk about it on TFR. We'll talk about it. Rob and I will talk about it on TIE Fighter Renegades. The new Rise of Skywalker, the Star Wars Episode 9 trailer that dropped Monday. Boy. I have such mixed feelings on this. I mean, again, we'll talk about it on TFR. I haven't had the chance to talk to Rob, but just crazy schedule as always. I haven't had the chance to talk to Rob about what he thought about it. I'm watching it. It's obviously incredibly exciting. Could Rey maybe just I don't know. Daisy Ridley's got to be in the most fantastic shape in the history of the planet, because I think all she does is run. I want her to be in a movie called Standing, where it's just her and she could just stand and there's so much epic shit going on in that. It's crazy, the stuff happening with Star Destroyers and all that. I mean, it's really no doubt it looks fucking epic. I don't know, I get it, and then I don't get it, and I'm really of two minds on the whole thing. And, Let It Ride really, the honest fact is, okay, again, we'll go in depth on TFR. Because there's so many cool, seeing the ghost in it was great. That was a nice touch. The ship from Rebels, and there were some other things that were of interest in it. The honest fact of the matter is, and this is, instantly what I tell myself every time. I barely even watch trailers anymore. Seriously. There's some, that I have to watch because I do a Star Trek show and I do a Star Wars show. So sure, I watch these trailers, okay? That makes sense. But, something that I'll give you, all right, I'm going to tell you something, but then I'll give you an example, okay? Of ones that I don't really watch, trailers that I don't watch. But here's the thing. Trailers today are meaningless. And we've brought this up on Sovereign Tech before. That it's about to the point that really, I don't believe in the legal system or even really using it, okay? But to be clear, I think that fans of some of these franchises could really, I think they could make a class action lawsuit against the studios and say, wait a minute, especially with the pre-orders, and I guess Rise of Skywalker, I pre-ordered as well, tickets, for opening night, the night, well, it's coming out the 20th, but that means you can see it on the 19th, of course. But they broke some kind of record that Avengers Endgame held. Okay, great, whatever. But here's the thing. So you put money down. It'd be different if there weren't pre-orders. And the whole pre-order process is, it's fucking nonsense, But here's the deal, is that you put down money based upon the trailer. Now, I would argue that if I believed in suing and the legal system, that you would have the right, if things in the trailer are either misrepresented or aren't actually in the film, which happens all the time, especially now. This used to not so much be the case. It happened, but now, it's order of the day. I think fans should have the right to sue the studios and say, wait a minute, this isn't at all what you showed me in the trailer. And with Star Wars alone, this has happened multiple times. So I don't, I check out the trailers. Sometimes they give me some warm fuzzies, but frankly, I couldn't give a shit, about the trailer. The movie, when the movie comes out, I'll watch it. If it's great, it's great. And I'm hoping that it is. And if it's not, well, I've got a show where I'm going to talk about it. And there's more Star Wars than just, episode 9. But I've said this on TFR. If this movie sucks, I don't know. I have so much Star Wars that I can continue to love and enjoy, and I will. I will play TIE Fighter until the day I die. And there are a lot of Star Wars games that I will continue to play until the day I die. I'm sure as fuck ain't going to be Jedi Fallen Order, but or Battlefront 2, the new one, the classic one. I probably would. But fuck, the trailer doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything. You have no idea what the movie's even going to be about. The entire movie could change by the time that it gets into actual theaters and everything, a la Rogue One. I just don't care about trailers. Look, I'll go see a movie. I don't have to see a trailer to go see a movie. Okay? For example, granted, maybe it has to be more of an established franchise for me to even want to bother. But for example, I think maybe I saw a quick trailer for Terminator Dark Fate. Is that what it's called, right? Dark Fate. So Ellen and I have been rewatching the Terminator movies as late to get prepped for this, because I think it ends up coming out next week. And, she hasn't watched a trailer, and we're just going to go see it. It's like, oh, it's a Terminator movie. Okay. And boy, isn't it weird? It just struck me when we were watching the first Terminator movie the other night. And she loves it, by the way. But it just struck me that it's funny James Cameron jumps back into Terminator after Harlan Ellison dies. Now, if you know the history behind that Harlan Ellison sued James Cameron in the studio over what he thought was, IP nonsense, that they, basically stole ideas from his short story, whatever, to make Terminator. The reality around that, whether or not that's actually true, whatever, it's an old argument. But it's interesting that as soon as Harlan Ellison dies, suddenly James Cameron waltzes back in. And I wonder if there's some kind of legal crap around that. I don't know. IP can belong to an estate after somebody dies, so who knows? But I just find it ironic that he stepped away and then, then suddenly, and he doesn't step back in until after Harlan Ellison dies. Because I know Harlan as a dear friend, he was. I know he got a pretty sweet paycheck out of that deal, out of getting, his name's in the credits now for the first Terminator film. So anyway, long story short, trailers are basically meaningless. Again, I will watch the ones, I didn't need to see a Hobbs and Shaw trailer to go see the new Fast and Furious movie. I don't need to see the trailer for Fast and Furious 9. I'm going to go see it. I don't care. I put no faith, no stock in trailers. And there's plenty of other reasons not to put stock into a movie trailer, right? Because, well, for example, sometimes and it's not even, sometimes just a bad trailer gets cut. Here's a great movie, The Postman, with Kevin Costner. Great film. Talk about epic, awesome film. If you saw the trailer, you had no fucking idea that it was the movie that you thought you were going to see. And I don't think it was a case of misrepresentation, because there's nothing in the trailer that wasn't in the film. It was a shitty trailer. Like they cut a dumb trailer. And it's a shame, because a lot of, other, back when critics used to matter, of course it's debatable if they ever did, but back when they used to matter, like Leonard Maltin said, he's like, oh, the trailer, this is back 20 years ago, but Leonard Maltin was like, oh, the trailer was fucking horrible. He says, but the movie was good. And that happens, So a long time ago, I learned not to give a shit about trailers. And also critics' opinions. but certainly now it's like trailers are basically, they are mini movies themselves, and they're not even representative of the movie that they're going to put out there. So anyway, I've had this kind of conversation before on Sovereign Tech, so I don't necessarily have to rehash it here, but I know I actually had some people asking me about it. And here you go. Like, this is for everybody who's DM'd me on Twitter and emailed me. Here's my response for now. We'll deep dive on my on my deeper thoughts about it when we cover it on TFR later this month, Rob and I. But otherwise, anyway, there's my thoughts on it. And it's not just me. I don't think just I shouldn't care about trailers. Frankly, I don't think you should either, because the trailer for The Last Jedi. They purposely spliced and recolored They went that far to where they recolored the footage to make it look like Rey was going to join Kylo Ren, and join the dark side, and that he was like going to become her teacher. I mean, they recolored it to where, because the scene, they were two completely different scenes, but it made, they did like an orange coloration to make it look like it was the same scene where, Kylo's reaching out his hand. And I mean, you're just lying at that point, straight up lying. And I'm so tired of that part of I'm so tired of the movie industry anyway, but like that part of it is just fucking insane. So, a conversation I want to have at some point has to do with that I am, and I believe me, I hate this. I hate that I am coming to this conclusion and that I think this way. I am beginning to believe that like books, and I mean audiobooks if you make an audiobook out of it, but basically books in the abstract, and not magazines either, but just straight books, whether it's a novella, short story collection, novels, whatever, books, fiction books, and maybe this could go so far to nonfiction as well, are really the only art form. And we're not talking about paintings. I'm talking about something that's designed to be entertainment as we understand it, a story. Okay. Not even comic books. The comic book industry is a complete fuck up right now. It is a complete fuck up. The amount of, I was just looking the other day and there's another X-Men #1. That's gotta be, in my lifetime, probably like the 20th X-Men #1. I might be exaggerating a little bit, but not by much. It's crazy. Crazy that we're getting that many. And I get why, I understand the concept behind like, well, #1s boost sales. Yeah, but now you're doing like a new #1 every fucking year, Marvel. And DC's no better. DC's got some bullshit cooked up for 2020 where apparently they're going to replace all of their major superheroes with some new incarnation. Like someone else is going to be Batman. Someone else is going to be Superman. It's going to be Superboy, right? It's going to actually be Superman. I think that's what I've heard, or this is the rumor mill that's going around. And look, DC, slap me once, shame on you. Slap me twice, shame on me. Like, I bought into New 52, and I thought New 52 was really, really cool. Like, I was behind that idea, updating all this stuff and, starting in a new universe. Just like in the 90s, I was on board with Heroes Reborn, which Marvel did. I don't mind rebooting the universe or even just segments of it. But now when you're doing it every year or every couple of years, oh, fuck you. And I'm not even saying the new X-Men #1 is a complete reboot. I don't think it is. Okay. But regardless, this is the direction that these guys are basically going. And I'm tired of the because you feel like, okay, I invest a year of my life into the history of these characters or a couple of years, and then you just fucking, you restart with new numbering. And I don't know. It doesn't feel special. It just feels cheap. Yeah, the comic book industry is fucking horrible. So not even the comic book industry falls into this. But to finish my point, books, novels, are the only pure form of entertainment left. Meaning that they don't have to have. That you can still find new books, even though there's plenty of old ones to read, and there are plenty. But new books, it doesn't cost, there's no major crazy budget to write a book. There's no crazy budget to put a book up on Amazon. In fact, it's practically free. Okay. There's no barrier to entry. You don't have to have the incentives. You can make a deep, wild, challenging, weird ass novel and put it up and out there for whatever price tag that you put it up for, and you can do that. But it's the only place where you can get that kind of, weird, strange, challenging, root striking kind of content anymore, because everything else, movies, TV shows, comic books, go down the list, they've all got to do, and games are no better. Boy, look at the fixed WWE, or fixed WWE 2K20. Check out that hashtag on Twitter. Even I got in on that. I mean, it's ridiculous. Like these gaming companies, they're putting out, I was going to cover this on Gaming Grid, but maybe I'll just talk a little bit about it here. We got great questions to get into, folks, and great emails. But anyway, 2K Games, the company that does this, and it's true for also NBA 2K20, like they're shipping games with wild bugs in them, and part of that is that they come out with a new game every year, and they have to do that. Like every AAA game dev house, okay, or game company, they have to do this because the budgets, the amount of money that they have to make to keep everybody employed, at least, at 2K Games or EA or wherever. I mean, they're greedy fuckers too, there's no doubt there. Okay, but also just to keep everybody employed, the overhead alone is in the millions of dollars. Hell, I mean, making games costs as much as making movies now. And so, they're just like, well, we're going to do everything on pre-order anyway. And so, who cares? We get their money and we put out a buggy product. Who gives a shit? Fuck, is it insane? Kudos to Nintendo. What was the Tokyo game there? There was a game that they didn't tell everybody wasn't going to be the uncensored version that was coming to the West. And it was also in Japan that's coming to Switch. And when everybody found out it was going to be the censored version, people rose a stink. And Nintendo graciously, and rightly so. I mean, Nintendo's no angel, but rightly so. They're like, okay, if you want a refund, go ahead. We'll give you a refund because we didn't make it clear that this is going to be a censored version of the game. Was it Tokyo Mirage or whatever the hell it is? I don't know. So, I mean, I play games on the Switch, but like, I've been playing Power Rangers Battle for the Grid, almost exclusively for like 2 weeks. I don't know why I bought any other game. No, I know why I bought some of them, but it's so great. Yeah, Power Rangers, baby. Anyway, so yeah, I feel like, like novels, it's the only place where, yeah, you want to make money doing it. So do I. I mean, I'm an author. I write books. Okay. I have new books coming very quickly, actually. And, I want to make money off of it. Of course I do. But I can, at the same time, do it. I can be as niche as I want to be. I can be as strange as I want to be with these books. And I don't have to worry about the overhead. The only thing I'm losing is my time. Time is money. Okay, fine if you want to go there. But regardless, if I did it as a hobby, like it's a hobby that doesn't cost me anything. And so, I can put it out there. If it sells, it sells. If it doesn't, no skin off my back. I don't lose, $1 million, multi-million dollar budget or anything. And that's why I'm saying, I'm not saying financial incentives are inherently a bad thing, but it has gotten to a point where the financial, like the amount of money you have to make off of anything you create today, other than books, is so fucking high that, yeah, you have to dumb down the content. You have to make it, appeal to the lowest common denominator. When you do that, you lose something very, very special. And you can't be root striking, and you can't be really, I think, evolutionary or revolutionary in your thinking and your writing. I mean, think of philosophers and other people who, if they had to be popular, if they thought in their head, well, shit, I've got to make a shit ton of money off of this. Imagine Nietzsche. Imagine Nietzsche being like, for Zarathustra, oh man, I got to sell at least 1 million copies of this, or I can. We would have lost out on one of the most beautiful philosophical works, one of the most beautiful philosophers of all time. And look, that Nietzsche sure as fuck wasn't thinking like, well, the guy hated socialism, so, it's not like anything like that, like he was against making money. I'm just making the point that the financial incentives are fucking insane today, and it's killing us. In every way. As far as entertainment goes, and look, art is the meaning of life. It really, art is the basis of the human condition. It really is. It's one of, I think they all kind of stem from the same tree, but it's certainly what separates us from the animals, even though we are still animals ourselves, but it's what puts us a cut above, shall we say. Yeah, it's fucking twisted out there. And I mean, I yikes, you know? So anyway, yeah. So write books, folks. It doesn't cost much. And you can get some really great shit out there. Shit that, you know, if it's not respected now, maybe in 100 years, people will be like, holy fuck, look what this guy wrote, or gal, or NB, or Z, or whatever. You might change the world 100 years from now. Who knows? So anyway, 20 minutes on all that. A little 20-minute screed. I do want to read an email here quick, which is in reference to stuff that we talked about last week during the Q&A. Kind of opened up talking a bit about wrestling. And, well, here's an email, folks. And I'm sure the person wouldn't mind, you know, if I said who they were. It's a very real person. One of my top donors, or top patrons for years now, by the way. And also a person who I know has great taste in music. God damn it. Anyway, he says, woo, he opened it up with, woo, your recent Q&A discussion of AEW and NWA was great. I really appreciate you talking about them. Please keep the pro wrestling stuff coming. I watched the network TV stuff in the 80s, got back into it in the late 90s until about 2004 when WWF/E's writing petered out, got Mick Foley to autograph my very own Sacco in 2013. Woo, hell yeah, brother. Sadly, I was the last person in line. He was tired, so no conversation with him, and perennially wonder how things are going in the wrestling world. Anyway, thank you. Okay, because sometimes, like, I'll give you a little bit of pro wrestling talk here in a second. Okay, but you know, this is especially true, like on Twitter. You know, I know a lot of like Bitcoin guys and the Bitcoin savvy guys, which, by the way, folks, you know, got to get out another thank you quick to Voltoro for being a Sovereign Tech sponsor. I am such a big fan. Josh Shigala over there is a sweetheart of a man, a dear friend. And just Voltoro is just one of the best companies in the world, straight up. You need to be checking them out. If you didn't hear the ad by chance, do check them out. I implore, especially my patrons. This is a company, and because they want to do, as long as they see the value, they want to do a very long-term relationship with Sovereign Tech. And I would love for that to be a reality for a multitude of reasons. Okay, I just like to be able to, you know, I like to make money off of it, but I also like to be able to promote the genuinely great companies out there. Okay, so, you know, please. It's not like a Blue Chew situation where Blue Chew kind of reached out to me. Oh, I could tell you about another sponsor. God damn it. I had a sponsor that was running like a pickup artist channel and had a few books. Speaking of books. Holy hell. You know, I said this on Twitter, speaking of Twitter, and we'll get into Twitter in a second, okay? Talk about the Bitcoin space. Look, and this is not me boasting, okay? This is not me boasting. I have been in love with, had relationships with, been in bed with, literally the most brilliant and beautiful women on the planet. Literally. This is that it's not, I know some people like to say that, because they're just being sweet or something. No, this is no exaggeration. And still am. Okay, Ellen is absolutely the most brilliant, beautiful, she is amazing. Beyond amazing. I can't even begin to tell you. Maybe, you know, if there were enough, I'll tell you, if there were enough response, and I'd understand maybe why listeners wouldn't want this, but if there are enough response, I'd love to do like a regular relationship rhombus show again with me and Ellen, you know, for the underground feed, just for patrons only. If you're interested in that, tell me. Okay, email me, bbs@sovereigntech.com. Go ahead and message on this episode if you want, however or DM me on Twitter, whatever, let me know. Okay, but let me tell you something. Pickup artists, there's no way I'm taking their money. Okay, no matter how much, if I ever needed it, I wouldn't take their money. B, they're full of shit. Now, I'm not saying I have all the answers, okay? But they don't know shit. They are full of shit. And all you're going to get out of life, you know, you put superficial in, you're going to get superficial out. And that's all these fuckers go for. And it's deplorable and disgusting, and fuck them. And, look, me, like I said on Twitter, I am not a good-looking guy. I have a face for radio. There's a reason I do podcasts. Okay? I am not a good-looking guy. I am not a man of money. I am not, all these traits that supposedly are what get you with the hot gals and all this stuff. I am none of that. But I have been, in my, not just my opinion, I think objectively with the best. Okay? So, and that's not a boast. That is, if I am boasting about anything, it is those amazing women. Okay? Don't fall for this pickup artist crap. It doesn't work. It's not going to make you fulfilled. You're not going to feel fulfilled in your life. It is horseshit, and it is just a money grabbing scheme. Now, that said, back to what I was going to get to with Twitter. With Twitter, it feels like people want to follow you, but they only want you to talk about your specialty. They don't want you to talk about like social media, as we're sold it, is about you getting yourself out there, right? Putting yourself out there. And, it's selling a bit of your personal brand, things like this. Okay. No. People just, and maybe this speaks to some of that superficialness that somehow works on the internet, sadly. People just want you to talk about, I guess they just want me to talk about tech, or maybe they just want me to talk about Bitcoin, and they don't care about the multitude of aspects. Now, granted, I do think, and if this is a boast, okay, I do think I'm somebody who has a way more varied interest, and not just interest, but mastery, dare I say, of many, many things. Okay? When I am into something, I am all in. And even I am stunned at times of how much I'm into. All right? If I have anything, I guess I have a brain, and a pretty good one. But that's about all the credit I'll give. To myself, of course. So, I'll share about wrestling. I'll share about whatever else on Twitter. And by and large, the only things, and it's fine. I'm not necessarily complaining, but I'm just saying that, I don't know. There's a lot of times where I don't know if you are interested in what I am talking about. Okay. And I'm going to do it anyway because, the reason I started podcasting is because my opinions or whatever else aren't out there. And right now, a lot of what I've talked about on Sovereign Tech is directly related to much of the entertainment industry. So it's important to, to kind of cover that as well, because I think they all kind of speak to each other, much like we had that conversation about YouTube in the most recent, was that episode 347 or 348 of Sovereign Tech that came out? That's important. And that it's all connected, because guess what? Technology has interconnected everything and everyone. So now there's nothing that it doesn't touch and doesn't have influence over, and that frankly isn't worth talking about. So I talk about it. So I appreciate it when you guys let me know, especially with something that, sadly has this stigma of not being intellectual, which is not even remotely true. Something like pro wrestling. Okay. Now, granted, ironically, the WWE today is turning it back into a, dare I say, an anti-intellectual affair. Okay, they are making it for the dum-dums, which speaks to what we were talking about earlier, how everything has to be made for the lowest common denominator. In the 90s, that changed. Okay, now you had Crockett Promotions, or what used to be the NWA back in the 80s, like this emailer, okay, like he brought up, okay, that was very adult stuff because it was considered premier entertainment in the South of the United States. And it's not because Southern people are dumb. Stop that. Let that one go too. Okay? Folks, where's NASA? Uh-huh. Okay. So, it ain't really in White Sands anymore, folks. But, so, that was adult. And then, when you get to the 90s, and wrestling being more of an adult, rather intellectual and clever entertainment, the WWF, or what would be now the WWE, had to shift things up, and Vince McMahon came on the air at the beginning of a Raw and said, "We're not going to insult your intelligence anymore." he was basically saying, we're going to bring, wrestling to a cut above. Of course, this is also when the term sports entertainment, came into play. And for a good while, in fact, up until like exactly what this listener that emailed me said, about 2004 is really when things very much started going downhill. And I stuck with it a little bit longer than that, but yeah, the writing was certainly on the wall at that point. And now, now the WWE is just mindless now. It really is like there's nothing. There might be a couple wrestlers that are pretty good there, but by and large, like there's nothing great going on, and everything you might have loved about wrestling, if you were into it when it was more of an intellectual pursuit, it was. It's not like the greatest philosophical work of all time. No one's claiming that, okay? But it sure as hell isn't, for kids and the dum-dums. We're getting back. Well, WWE went away from that, but now we have organizations that are bringing it back to where, okay, it's cool in a genuinely cool, not cool as in everybody watches it, which was kind of happening in the 90s, but it's cool again in that, more mature adult content. I shouldn't even say intellectual. I guess maybe I should say mature, is coming back out. AEW, we're only a few episodes deep with AEW. It's not bad. It's good, and there are some really, really interesting matches. I am definitely, I'll say this much, because last night, episode 3 of NWA Power came out. I am way, way more interested in what the NWA is doing than I am AEW. I'll put that out there right now. I'll probably cover it more in the future, and we'll see what shape that kind of takes. But I couldn't believe how excited I was for Tuesday night at 6:05 p.m. on YouTube to watch the new NWA Power. Like I was just waiting for it. And I did. I watched it live, and it was great. There were some like production issues I think that occurred during it, but they're only 3 episodes deep. This is very indie promotion, even though it has a lot of history behind it. I was once again impressed, and in fact, end up with NWA more so than what AEW has done. NWA started setting up some storylines, and they were storylines that made a degree of sense last night. In fact, I was also very impressed. It ended, I think most of us, even only 3 episodes in, we were expecting NWA Power to be an hour long. And it ended, it seemed like 10 minutes early. It only went about 50 minutes. And there were people who I could see in the chat room on YouTube, they were complaining about this. And I'm like, oh no, don't complain. Like, do a strong, tight show. And because, it's the opposite of what WWE does today, where now they're trying to fill in 2 and 3 hour time slots, and they're just drawing shit out, and you're getting so much fluff and bullshit. No, give me a tight hour of tremendous wrestling and, some talking. And I am on. I am there for that. And if it ends 10 minutes early, great. Keep me wanting more next week, because I want more. At the very end of it, you had, you had Nick Aldis, the world champion, coming out and, checking on Tim Storm and everything. You didn't know what was going on with the Eli Drake. What's that going to set up? It was fantastic. And some pretty good promos getting cut there last night too. And a lot of credit being given to Ricky Starks, who I thought cut an amazing promo and had tremendous in-ring talent on episode 2 of NWA Power. So I am way more excited about what NWA Power is doing, because I feel like, first off, in AEW, I'm a little worried about the shape that the guys are in. It's pretty sad to say, but I think it's true. Tim Storm in NWA is 54 years old. Okay? He's 54 years old. He has a better body than half the guys in the WWE and just about everybody in AEW. He just, he looks like a tank. You totally believe it when he sells, just like bashing into a guy and the guy goes down, So, yeah, AEW, I'm not so pleased. Because body is something, and you don't have to be like Frank Zane or Schwarzenegger or something to look good in a wrestling ring. There are a lot of different types of wrestlers and body types, but the body types just none of them seem right. I mean, there's some great talent in AEW. I'm not saying there isn't, and I'm not necessarily knocking Chris Jericho either. I love Chris Jericho. Okay, but I don't, body, whatever it is, if you want to be the, the corpulent guy, or you want to be the chiseled guy or whatever, there are certain stereotypes which wrestling thrives off of because it is a very visual medium that you want to parlay and portray, and AEW doesn't seem to have that together. I know they have a talent, and they're aware. I know that they're aware that they are still figuring out their talent roster. But they gotta pick that up. They gotta pick that up. And I do think also, as cool as the Inner Circle is, Chris Jericho's group, it's too early for a stable. They should not have gone in this running with a stable. NWA is much smarter to have, you got great tag teams. You're starting to set up some tag teams. You get some tag teams established. Then you could start talking about creating a stable where it's like a group of wrestlers that have a similar goal. Think Four Horsemen, NWO, DX, and so on. You've got to do that first. And I have to applaud NWA for the tremendous pacing. The conversations and like the little storylines they're starting to set up, I think are right on. They're not going too fast with anything. They are doing it absolutely right. And it feels like you are watching that 80s network wrestling again, but you're seeing very modern talent. So it's kind of traditional as far as wrestling goes. But then at the same time, you're getting a lot of modernity in it. And for it to be out there for free, I mean, they're only going to win with that. And they already have a pay-per-view, I think, coming up in December called Into the Fire. And that sold out tickets inside of 3 hours for the NWA. Come on. Who should be buying for that? So, but I'm glad. It sounds like a lot of people are really excited for this. And they already sold out for the pay-per-view and whatever, and I can't wait for it. I'm very excited for it. So, I'll squeeze in some pro wrestling talk here and there if there's something that really sticks out. I am honored that you appreciate it and that you enjoy it. And actually, I know this listener very well, very intelligent man. And, I'm honored that I'm also not the only one, who considers, at least I consider myself an intelligent guy, that is also very much into wrestling. But I've known plenty of guys in my life who are, I know PhDs who they worship at Hulk Hogan's altar. I mean, they really do, or Ric Flair's altar. Much like myself. So, but anyway, let's get into another email here. But I do want to implore you, if you want to, maybe you, again, have dropped out of wrestling or you want to see what it's all about, if you want to see what wrestling was really supposed to always be all about and what got people so excited about it so many years ago, dare I say decades ago now, check out NWA Power. I mean, it's quote unquote must-see TV, in my opinion. So, and by the way, I mean, for those that don't know, it's run by Billy Corgan, Smashing Pumpkins. He's the guy, he is the CEO, he's the guy running this whole thing and funding this whole thing. And, I was never a big Smashing Pumpkins fan, but fuck, would I give Billy Corgan a hug right now, Despite all my rage, I would give him a hug. And I'd forgive him for making that song Tonight. Was that Tonight or whatever was the song? Not the Phil Collins one, the Smashing Pumpkins one. Holy hell. Anyway, thank you, Billy Corgan. Seriously. All right, let's get to another email here quick, and then we got a big question that we'll get into. Hey Brian, I have been inclined to start using PGP encryption in emails when possible. I see you have a Keybase profile with your public key, but I wanted to verify it's still the one you use. Would you be willing to talk about Keybase and the best way to find your public key on an episode, Prime or Patron only, whatever feels best, at some point? Thanks for all the great content. I can't wait for you and Ellen to do an episode of Sovereign Trek once Picard starts airing. Ellen and I talked about this. Absolutely. She has such a crazy schedule with college and everything, otherwise she loves being on the show. She would be on way more content. We actually have a lot of stuff planned that we need to get to recording. It's just, my schedule, her schedule. I mean, everything's just so crazy. But yeah, she loves it. And we will talk up some Picard. That's for sure. In fact, I want to have her on the next Sovereign Trek, at the very least, to talk about the trailer. speaking of trailers, about Picard, and kind of get her take on it, because she's a big fan of Picard, the character. So anyway, about Keybase, keybase.io. So this is a service that has morphed dramatically over the past few years. As far as my PGP key goes and everything, I have to update that across the board. Okay. And keybase.io is something that has like a mobile app and all this. And I've had it installed for a while, and I've been meaning to look into it more, because as I've looked into it and heard about it more, because I signed up for keybase.io when it was like in beta. So it didn't do half. Originally, it was just a way to verify keys. Now, like, it has its own chat protocol, basically. I mean, it has so much built into it. I am looking into it. Since someone asked me about it as well, I'm definitely going to go deeper on it. But this keybase.io, just to put it out there, might become the premier way to communicate and chat, more so even than Signal. Like, I am open to that, and some of the things that I've looked into and heard has me very excited as far as a lot of this goes. I mean, and keybase.io has been around for a while, which makes me willing to talk about it. Like, there's an app, it's called Briar. I still think that this is a brilliant app. It's done by a very small team of developers. There's no way they're really making money off of it, but they haven't done an update in a while. They did bring it out of beta. I felt like this was the app. Briar was the app where it can work without even a data connection, or without a telco. It can just work over Wi-Fi Direct or Bluetooth or whatever you want to use, and it goes through Tor. And I mean, like, it's fucking brilliant, and the amount of features it had was amazing. I don't think there's been an update in it feels like it's been years. So Keybase might be a little more. I mean, you have to have active development on this stuff. You have to. There is no library. There's no code base that you can just sit down with and just let sit and just be like, okay, and now that's fine. You've got to update sometimes. It doesn't have to be like every week. It doesn't even have to be every month. But, when there's no update in a year, when you consider the amount of security flaws and exploits that get discussed, or that get reviewed and covered and released every year, and you're not updating the shit, unless it's written in assembly, what am I supposed to think? Like, I can't trust that. So you gotta give us something. So Keybase has been around for a while. They do update fairly regularly. So that is something I'm going to explore, and I will probably do, to answer your question, I will do a big conversation on that on a Sovereign Tech Prime episode. It won't be in a Q&A, because this is going to be something that I'll probably want everybody to get on board with. So if you want to get ahead of the game, people listening, go for it. I will update my PGP key, or I'll have to update all of my info on there. I haven't gotten around to that yet, but anyway, there you go to answer that. And yes, Sovereign Treks about Picard, those will absolutely be coming. The show's not coming out end of January. It'll be coming out, and then things will be a little quieter then for Ellen and I. Will, and we'll make things happen. So also, this is great. P.S. Whatever happened to Muad'Dib of the motherboard? Fuck yeah, man. I haven't said that one in a long, long time. The Muad'Dib of the motherboard. I'll have to start using that again. Fuck, it's probably been like 200, hell, maybe 300 episodes since I've said that. So, bravo, sir, for having been such a long time listener. That's beautiful. Thank you. Anyway, a little Dune reference there. So, okay, before we get into, we do have a great album of the week lined up, but before we get into that, here's kind of our big question, where I actually will have more of a conversation around for this episode. Well, let's just read it. So, and this doesn't have to really do with tech. This actually has more to do with, religion of all things. How about that? Probably, I'm amazed at how many questions about religion I get. I'm actually, which is fine. I have a doctorate of divinity. Like, I get it. I'm not unknowledgeable about such matters at all. So, but always intrigued by this. Anyway, let's read it. Stallion! Exclamation point. New Underground member. Like another listener said, Zomia ONE is the best thing on the internet, though it could really use a better webpage. Did I mention this recently? This is something I am working on and looking into. I did update the webpage recently. I think I mentioned this on the Sovereign Tech somewhere, where like everything that was on the left-hand side is now on the right, and it's got like this full dark theme and everything. I am looking into going with a more full-on webpage, and part of that is because I have a lot of other stuff coming out that's not even just podcasts, where I feel like I need a central hub again, website. I tried to go with just what Podbean put out there, but it's definitely bare bones. It certainly helped as far as, running a lot of this stuff isn't a cheap affair, and it certainly cut down costs just using the Podbean site. But I think we gotta up the game a bit again. And so, yeah, thank you for your feedback. And believe me, I take no offense, and I totally understand. I mean, having the Podbean website was a matter of necessity. So anyway, if you want to help out with the show, there's a Bitcoin address, PayPal address, the score, that are available out there. And thank you. Okay. So let's see. Okay. I hear things after saying it's the best thing on the internet. Obviously I'm wildly honored by that. I hear things I've just never heard before come out of that noggin of yours, and as I've been listening back to old underground content, something stunned me. I'm going to stop here again. Thank you. I mean, there is so much underground content. There's literally thousands of hours. There's probably more hours of underground content than there are of Sovereign Tech episodes themselves. You have a lot to listen to, and the bulk of it is very evergreen stuff. So if you are new, and I mean, because of my schedule and other things, there was a good couple of years, 2-3 years, where I was almost coming out with daily content. Okay. You get to go back. If you're new, you get to go back and listen to all that, have a great time with it. And I assure you, and some of it's not just me, not just me on it. And I assure you, if you enjoy what I put out now, and if you enjoy Sovereign Tech, you're going to enjoy that. It's a pretty good bet. So anyway, thank you. I'm glad you're going through the old underground content, because there's, again, thousands of hours to go through. So if you want more of me, you got it. Anyway, so something stunned you. Let's read here. You said that Kabbalah says there is no God. You just glazed over this so quick, and you didn't elaborate. I know you tell us that if we want to know more about something you said, we have to ask, so I'm asking! Exclamation point. How is what is, according to you, so central to Judaism that there isn't the thing that Judaism is supposedly all about? God, or should I say Hashem? Keep it real, man of tomorrow. Yes, you should say Hashem, goddammit. Hashem's just like the safe word for God. Again, people that are really, deep into Judaism, they won't even spell. Like they think you're not even allowed to write out the name of God. Okay. So like if they spell God, it'll be G-D, it won't be G-O-D, it'll be G-D. So if you want to say God damn it, it would be G-D-A-M-M-I-T or M-N-I-T, right? Hashem is the safe word that you can spell out, which doesn't, it's a word that references God, but it's not actually like saying God. It's like, it's a meta term for God. And so it's safe for you to type that out. But anyway, whatever, you got to be into that sort of thing. Folks, I'm an atheist. Okay. In case anybody is still confused by this. Yes, and I do have a doctorate of divinity. I know the irony of that. I live off of it. I play with it often. Okay. So the idea that Kabbalah actually says there isn't a God. Yes, I think this is true. And part of it is from a more controversial interpretation of Kabbalistic works. And the other part is a not controversial interpretation, but just a more literal rendering of it. Okay. So Before getting into the more crazier aspect, I know you love when I go there. People love when I go there. But before getting into that, and something I've actually brought up many times over the long year history, or the many year history of Sovereign Tech, before I get into that part, because there's very little to say on that part, the bigger part is, let's take it from the one that is much more serious and not so controversial. Okay. And the not so controversial part has to do with a character, whether or not he was a real person. That's always up to debate with some of these historical figures from, say, 2,000 years ago or around there. Would be Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva was not originally a rabbi at all. In fact, he was a shepherd. In fact, a shepherd that supposedly couldn't even read, which is all the more impressive that come around age 40, I can feel that, Rabbi Akiva, being 38, come around age 40, he gets this, as he's, I guess, watching over the sheep, and this is in the 1st century, okay, CE, and he'd live into the 2nd century, so he lived during the time after the destruction of the Second Temple. Okay, so he lived during a time where Judaism was very much, this cannot be understated, where Judaism as a whole was very much in a state of flux, meaning that without a temple, what are we? Because the temple was the basis for, for the religion, for Judaism, for the people. And Judaism is tough, because and it's always a tough, and it can be a confusing conversation, because Judaism is both, or Jewishness, if you want to say that, is both a religion, a culture, and a people, a genetic people. It is a race of people. I am one of them. Okay, I am a Jew. Do I practice Judaism, though? Do I practice this religion that worships Hashem? No. Okay, but I am still, so, this is where things get confusing. And just for a touch of clarity, and and I've said this before, but maybe, it's important to understand with this. In my opinion, not just my opinion, and I consider it also objective fact, Kabbalism, okay, Kabbalah and Judaism those are not two separate things. They are one thing. There is no Judaism without Kabbalah. And in fact, I would argue that Kabbalah is actually Judaism's heart, right? Because the study of Kabbalah, to understand, and I know there's a lot of confusion around Kabbalah as well, okay? And that comes from the fact that it was like a Hollywood cult for a while, and you just had a lot of asshats, teaching all this stuff. Kabbalah is self-referentially the history of the world, and that's all it is. Okay, or should I say actually the history of the universe? But it is the history of the universe from a spiritual perspective, not so much a materialistic perspective. Though I do think it has materialistic elements in it, and I do think that ultimately it is talking about very real physical laws of the universe. Okay, so people talk about separating science and spirituality. Kabbalah is science and spirituality as one. Something we talk about with general semantics. Okay, general semantics, which is not Kabbalah, though actually I think Kabbalah would like it. They would work very well together. Non-Aristotelian logic basically suggests that, wow, there's so many places I want to go with this. Here's a scientific concept. Space-time. Now, in modern parlance, most people talk about space and time as two separate things. Like, you're keeping an eye on, if you look at your watch and you see it go from 12:22 to 12:23, you are watching time fly or time go by, right? And if you are walking from here to the gas station, you have covered such and so much space, or maybe you're talking about outer space or whatever. It is a grammatical flaw and a mental flaw to talk about these things and think about them in that way. because space-time is not space and time are not separate things. It is space-time, and it should always be referenced as space-time. Just like mind-body, okay? Your mind and your body. So many people talk about, oh, it's important, when they talk about health. There's mental health and there's physical health. These should not be separate things. You should never say mind and just talk about the brain. Or, you could talk about the brain as like a physical organ, but when you're talking about things like mental health, there should never be a mental health and a physical health. There should be mind-body health, because both have to be healthy. Like both are an intricate measure of its own health. There's not a both. It is one thing. Your mind and body are one singular thing. So you should really never spell, you should never just type mind. You should never just type body. You should type mind body, or you should always say that, to correctly reference what's, the true nature of it. Okay. And, this is just I think we referenced Nietzsche earlier. Nietzsche made it very clear, and I think he's right, that we will never get rid of God until we get rid of grammar. Basically, Nietzsche's point is that our very language is so inextricably linked with the notion of a God that you could never get people to lose, this isn't his term, but it's Stirner's term, you could never get them to lose that spook unless they spoke a completely different language. You would have to change the grammar from the ground up, which, general semantics would like. So, would like as well. So, and I say all this to suggest that with Kabbalah, the idea that science and spirituality are two separate things is completely inaccurate. They are one. What Kabbalah is saying is absolutely scientific within Kabbalah's own sense. Okay, I'm not saying that that's necessarily true. I'm just saying that's how Kabbalah thinks of itself. Okay. But I will say though, I don't think that's necessarily inaccurate. I think a lot of what Kabbalah talks about are absolutely scientific truths and concepts. Okay. Even though I'm not a fan of the word spiritual. I really, really don't like that term. But Rabbi Akiva wouldn't mind it. and, for a lot of people, they would consider, if I didn't say this earlier, that Kabbalah is really the spiritual history of the universe. Again, I would argue that there's no difference between science and spirituality, especially when it comes to Kabbalah, because the way that it talks about everything, it's as if it's like space-time and mind-body. It's the same idea. But regardless, with Kabbalah, Rabbi Akiva, again, he's this unlearned shepherd who can't read a damn thing. But then one day, when he's getting around 40, again, this is probably in the first century, he begins to wonder and feels this compulsion. Of course, rabbinicism would suggest that he got this from Hashem, got this from God. He feels this compulsion to understand how the world works, how it really works. And he begins to study, and he learns how to read the whole thing. And in so doing, ends up becoming one of the most seminal figures in Kabbalah as he does so. Now, a common rule in Kabbalah, and I am inclined to believe that this rule came from Rabbi Akiva's experience, that to study Kabbalah, first off, traditionally, you got to be a man. Second off, you got to be 40 before you can do it, because otherwise you haven't had enough life experience to prepare yourself for the dimensions that you're going to explore in Kabbalah. And again, I think that really started with how Rabbi Akiva's quote-unquote spiritual journey began. But what Rabbi Akiva would really discover is what he explicitly calls the law of love. Now, this notion, while I don't agree with everything Rabbi Akiva ever wrote, but this notion I don't think is too far from the truth. But he would go so far in this exploration of the law of love. Actually, if you listen to the recent, not Sovereign Tech, but the Sovereign Trek that I recently released, and I'd love to get people's feedback on that, I really would, because we had a very big conversation at the end of it about Gene Roddenberry. But the idea that in what we are learning about how the universe works, that, and in the search for truth, that love plays some kind of integral part in that. And I do believe this. Going into that, explaining that is a much bigger conversation than I think we're really prepared to have here. Okay. But to understand what Rabbi Akiva was saying is, he describes what he calls, what is the law of love. He describes that the universe has this force of love and giving. Okay, it's this force. Now, understand, speaking of the importance of language back in the day, and some languages still today, but language more in ancient times, would talk about things like luck and love and vengeance and, a lot of these concepts that we consider to be something that people that come from within a person and are acted upon by a person, okay, were actually described in the languages themselves, like in Latin and some others, were described as these forces that exist outside of you. It's not something that you have inside of you. It is something acting, not that you act upon, but that is acting upon you. So like luck would act upon you. Love would act upon you. As compared to today, you'd say, well, I make my own luck and I love and, and so on. I mean, it gets into some funny territory linguistically, but that's how a lot of ancient cultures saw things, is that some of these forces were something external. It was not something that came from within you. It was not like an emotional reaction. It was actually a universal reaction against you. Or, not against as in it was like against you or favor, but against you. Or upon you. So Rabbi Akiva talks about this force of love and giving. And he calls this force the creator. Now, when he expounds upon the law of love and he expounds upon this force, he talks about it as if it were gravity. The way he's describing it, it's very much, it just sounds like some kind of physical force that, Newton would have discovered or Einstein would have been talking about. And fuck, maybe Einstein was at points. But because Einstein certainly knew his shit when it came to Judaism. He would, go on to say that, well, Abraham figured a lot of this stuff out and it was a very new way of thinking at the time. And Abraham was traveling to try and spread this new way of thinking to a lot of different cultures and so on. This can get into your ability to interact with this force of love and giving. By Rabbi Akiva's measure, would be, well, Rabbi Akiva is one of the people who would, he's not the only one. Of course, some people would want to attribute it to Jesus. The phrase I'm about to give you existed well before him and was considered the sum of Torah. And arguably it is also the sum of Kabbalah, which again points at the fact that Kabbalah, Torah, Judaism, they're all the same thing. They are not separate words. They are, they're just interchangeable. They are all referencing the same thing. But Rabbi Akiva, would basically say, love, similar to what Jesus would say, love thy neighbor as thyself. This is the whole of Torah. But how you express that love thy neighbor as yourself is through a certain, shall we say, anti-egoism. Okay, it is through not self-love, but a more altruistic love. Now, I think this runs into problems. I think that there are if language is a major issue, which Kabbalah would certainly say is true, not just in the works of Rabbi Akiva, but in later, you think Abraham Abulafia and some others, they would bring this up as well, that, language gets in the way of your ability to understand the universe. And there are whole exercises that you can do where you try to deprogram effectively your brain from thinking in words and instead thinking more in concepts. Okay, and perhaps even symbols and things like this. Not an original notion, or it wouldn't sound like an original notion, but I would argue that maybe Kabbalah was the first or was carrying on that tradition throughout humanity's history. I mean, today, the idea of thinking in symbols and stuff like this, I mean, any Wiccan and whoever else that claims to have any kind of actual historicity, will say that that's what their idea that they came up with, blah, blah, blah. Well, whatever. I'm not going to knock anybody, but whatever. But I think this is where there is a problem. And also, I think like this language barrier is where there's some interpretation to be had that lends to the idea, and I would say fact, that Kabbalah says there is no God. Okay. So, was it Kirzigzog, the YouTube channel? They have this great video about altruistic egoism. And it's basically the notion that you, and this is also pretty Nietzschean as well, but that you are kind to others because it gives you the greatest net benefit to do so. But you're ultimately thinking about you. It feels altruistic, and that the dictionary definition of that word could be there. But nobody really acts out of altruism. Everybody acts out of enlightened self-interest, or maybe even unenlightened self-interest, but self-interest nonetheless. And so the idea, I don't think that Kabbalah is, even though people want to describe it as such today, like modern Kabbalists and even people who say have a better grasp of the work of various Kabbalists throughout history, including Rabbi Akiva. Even though I think they get confused, I do think that ultimately Kabbalah is saying that understanding that you will have a better experience in this life, okay, if you are kind and loving. I think Kabbalah says that. It does not say that self-love is a bad thing. In fact, I would argue in its very central tenet, which Rabbi Akiva reiterated, love thy neighbor as thyself, is basically saying you should love yourself a whole fucking hell of a lot. Otherwise, you can't properly express it to other people, right? And I mean, that almost sounds Ayn Randian, right? Where, what good are you if you're not, what good are you to anyone else that maybe you care about if you're not at your personal best? She would describe that as like the virtue of selfishness. I think she's kind of off the mark in the language she uses, but, Nietzsche would say similar things. Stirner would say similar things. There's plenty of people who had said it long before she ever did. And I would argue that that's actually what Kabbalah is saying. Now, and it comes from just a very straightforward, literal interpretation of, rabbis throughout history. In that it's not, Torah, Judaism, Kabbalah is not saying don't engage in self-love. It's actually saying yes, and then love everybody else the same way. And remember, folks, love's not a bathtub, it's an ocean. There's no limits on love, which is kind of part one of where I think it's actually a universal principle. But that is another conversation, because I don't have that all figured out yet, and I don't think anybody does, but I think there have been people who have been trying for a long time. Now, where does Kabbalah say that there isn't a God? It says that in the fact that it is, like Rabbi Akiva did and others after him, that the Creator, not God, okay, I mean, yeah, God, but the Creator, which people, kind of lump in with this concept of God, the Creator is merely a force of love and giving. There is no prerequisite for that force to be a sky daddy. Okay? Like there is nothing within, especially earlier Kabbalistic texts, or in the works of Abulafia, Akiva, go down the list. I mean, Maimonides, maybe, but even Maimonides spends so much time in the Guide to the Perplexed, which is one of the biggest books in Judaism. He spends so much time in that book deconstructing the physicality of God, meaning when he's talking about in Torah, like when Torah says that the arm of God, it's not a literal arm. He is spending the entire time saying exactly what Rabbi Akiva and others were getting at, that God is this, or, this notion we have of God and what we write down is this force. Okay. Now, is it an intelligent force? Is it a force that acts with, some kind of autonomy, some kind of direction? okay, some kind of consciousness, for lack of a better phrase. Again, there's nothing to suggest that that's necessary. And in fact, Judaism spends so much time in the Mishnah and in so many things trying to explain what seem to be contradictory notions of where, God seems to be angry and about vengeance and all this stuff, but then God is ultimately a force of love and giving. How can it be both? And I would argue the reason that it's both is that because it's something acting without agency. It is just merely this law of the universe. Or I would argue that that's what Kabbalah is saying. I should be more clear on that. And so there is no Sky Daddy in Kabbalah. There is merely some kind of physical law of the universe, some kind of force, okay, that is, now, did it lead to creation somehow? Maybe, I mean, frankly, I think there'd be almost as much evidence for this as there would be for dark matter or dark energy, which are both, in my opinion, bullshit concepts. And I'm putting out maybes, and I'm saying what Kabbalah says. I'm not necessarily saying what I believe, okay, or what I think is so, all right, because belief isn't the most scientific of terms, is it? So, but that's it. That's where this comes from, okay, is that Kabbalah is very clear, or I think it's very clear, that there isn't some there isn't some being out there. There isn't some Sky Daddy that, with a gray beard looking down on you, just ready to crack the whip or something like that. Quite the opposite. It is something that can only act within love and giving. Okay. It can only act in that way. And it is a force. Okay. So it's actually describing, there's the phrase God is love. Okay. That's accurate. But then there is no God. Okay. But what we confuse as a God is love. And what is love? Well, those are big questions. Is it this? You hear it in the Sovereign Tech intro all the time. The universal foundation of love. Again, that part is a big conversation, but it doesn't you don't need that conversation to understand that Kabbalah is effectively saying there is not a Sky Daddy. Okay. There is a force of love and giving. That is not a Sky Daddy. And that is not necessarily like a creator of the universe. Okay. Because I also think that Kabbalah actually bolsters the notion that there's no beginning to the universe. Because Kabbalah is the thing that says Torah has basically always existed. Torah is effectively the history of the universe. Okay. And, just again, by a very literal understanding of that, the idea that Torah has always been is suggesting that the universe has always been. Not something outside of space-time. Like there's like St. Augustine has that concept of God, right? Where God is something that exists, he exists outside of space-time. No. I'm not suggesting that at all. I'm saying that the idea that Torah has always existed means that the universe must have always existed. Very literal, but these are big concepts that, and again, Judaism makes it hard because when you read, the Talmud and you read other things within Judaism, a lot of it's just a bunch of Jews arguing with each other, and we're very good at it. We love arguing and going back and forth at each other, and then having some nice challah at the end of the night. I can't tell you how much of my life has been like that. When I first moved to New Hampshire, in fact, I'm going to be celebrating 8 years here in just a few days. October 28th will be my 8th year in New Hampshire. The thing I loved doing was going to ironically, the CAC at the time. That's what it was called, in Keene. And just like, I wanted to just sit down and start hammering all this shit out with people, like, all right, let's talk libertarianism. Let's do this. Let's get to let's put this on the crucible of truth and make it happen, and talk it up. And unfortunately that didn't happen too often, but that's kind of what I was hoping would be here. Anyway, we got we're getting into a long Q&A here. So the last part, let's get away from all that. So there you go. Force of love and giving. Now you got that part. The second part is that a lot of times, so there are multiple names used for God within Kabbalistic texts. One of the most common ones is the Ancient of Days. That's particularly popular in the Kabbalistic text, the Book of Zohar. And in the Ancient of Days, or when it references the Ancient of Days, there is a very infamous book that I have talked about many times. There's actually two of them. There's the Mana Machine and the Kabbalah Decoded, which are both written by the same guys, George Sassoon and Rodney Dale, I think are their names. These are books from the 70s, long out of print. I have copies, but they suggest that the Ancient of Days was actually a machine, and that's what they call the Mana Machine. It was a machine that the Israelites had, that they must have inherited, that fed them as they were going through the desert. And in fact, the idea of the Sabbath came from the day when, and the reason that you'd get a double portion of manna on Friday, according to Torah, was because on the Sabbath, on Saturday, you had to clean the manna machine. Like the priesthood, the Levites, they had to clean the manna machine. And then it would function for the following week. And again, it would do the double portion on Friday and so on. And that's kind of the basic gist of that. I think that their evidence stands pretty strong, including with a lot of other interpretations overall of Torah, and including the work of like Ahmed Osman and the idea that Torah is actually referencing, do I want to go there? Is actually referencing Egyptians. We'll just say that, but we'll bookmark that. We'll save that for another time. You can ask me about it, I guess, and I could talk about it, but we'll save that for another time. But yeah, so those things, the idea that the Book of Zohar, when it's talking about God, is actually talking about physical devices, like machines. And then the notion that Kabbalah breaks God down to a force of love and giving, basically, I think, debunks the notion that there is a God. And I think Kabbalah is very clear, and I think maybe the really hardcore Kabbalists are well aware of that. And there's something to be said within Judaism. You also, this is kind of a third part of it. Within Judaism also, there is the idea of that you actually have, it's not just two, but for the interests of brevity, you have two, everybody has two souls. There is your animalistic soul, which I guess would be attached maybe to the breath of life. And then there is your higher order soul, which is the soul that like animals and others don't have, because that higher order soul is what actually connects you to God, or in the case of Kabbalah, the force of love and giving. And that other soul, or whatever the hell that is that Kabbalists were describing for so long, and that Judaism, has as a part of it. Again, that soul's broken up into a bunch of different parts as well. So it's not just two, but we'll just call it two for now. Whatever that is accessing this creative power. And I think that may have some attachment to this idea of creation. That has some attachment to art being at the center of the human condition, to kind of bring this conversation full circle. A lot of the stuff is still stuff that I'm, figuring out. I don't know anybody a lot of people, if anyone, that's like writing about this or talking about this. And so these are the thoughts I have really in my spare time. And, and this is what I do for kicks. And these are the kind of, dare I say, high level conversations that I like to have. So, Ellen and I have these conversations all the time. It's fun, beautiful, wonderful, and downright enjoyable. So anyway, if you want to ask anything more on any of that, I hope I got to your question. I hope I gave you somewhat of a satisfactory answer. If you have a argument, we Jews like arguments. If you have an argument against it, please, I am so open to that. Hopefully I just said to you that I love having these kinds of conversations. So please do. And let me know what you think. So, let's get into our album of the week. Let's wrap this one up. In fact, a very interesting album of the week. I'll just say it. This is an album that comes actually as a disappointment. Fortunately, just recently I found out why. I think it came off as such a disappointment. An album. Did I give this album of the year in 2017? I might have. I thought this album was dynamite. It's by a band, a newer band, but they play like there's something like a, quote unquote hair metal, even though I hate that word or term, hair metal band out of the 80s. A band called Cruz. They've been around for about 5 years now. And they had an album come out in 2017 called Bad Blood Rising that I think is just one of the, it is so fucking badass. In fact, like Ellen was asking me, we go to the gym, pretty much every night. And she's like, oftentimes she'll ask me, so what should I listen to tonight, And the other night I said, listen to Bad Blood Rising by a band called Santa Cruz. And she was like, but she tried it on and she goes, wow. She really enjoyed it, and understandably, it's one of the, I love that album. It's almost track for track. I don't so much care for the slower stuff on it, but there are so many great songs. I've even played them at the beginning of Sovereign Text over the years now. But the reason I recommended it to her was that a new album by them had dropped that morning. So this is very fresh, and it's called Katharsis with a K instead of a C. And this just came out in October 2019. I got to tell you, Bad Blood Rising from 2017, that is such a dynamite album, so energetic, so much fun, really appeals to a classic rock style. This album is not that. It's not really that at all. The first 2-3 songs I kind of like, but it's 11 tracks. How many tracks we got here? Yeah, it's 11 tracks. It's an 11-track album, and I just did not have. It's not a good time. Now I learned that the lead singer, who as of now is the only original member left, even though they've only had a couple albums so far. So it's not like it's a major breakup, But regardless, the singer is the only original guy left, and he had a terrible bout with alcoholism, and he went through rehab, and he basically hired on a whole new band. And so he has also gone with, because of all of this, apparently, he has gone with a very different sound. And so I listened to this. When I saw it, it was a surprise. I didn't know it was coming out. And I was like, oh, holy shit. Wow, 2019 is the fucking year of music, as I've been saying over and over again throughout 2019. Because, wow, we even got a new Santa Cruz album. This is going to be so much fun. And I put it in and it's not fun. And it was just, it wasn't bad. And the guy's a talented singer. And everybody involved seems pretty talented, but it just wasn't great. And it wasn't, I don't even want to label it as good. The first song, Changing of Seasons, I didn't mind that. I was like, okay, well, it's kind of a newer sound. I can get with this. But then there's just nothing left of whatever you thought you knew as Santa Cruz. I think they should have changed the name. I think he should have went with even I forget his name. It's something, they all put Cruz at the end of their name now. All the original band members. If I were him, I would have given it a solo title, had a solo album, basically be a solo album, because this is not Santa Cruz. If you like their previous albums, and I did, this ain't them. And so I was actually really, really disappointed by this. So I'm giving you an album that I guess I'm putting it out there as a warning because I spoke so well of this band. What a shame. That it kind of fell off. I'm glad the guy's, alive and hopefully healthy and everything. I don't want to take anything away from that, but what a goddamn shame that this album doesn't live up to its predecessor. Doesn't even come close, and even if it came close, there was that Crash Diet album that came out recently. Was it Rust? It sounds, at the very least, it sounds like Crash Diet. Even if it's not the greatest album of theirs by any stretch, at least it sounds like Crash Diet, and you kind of get the gist and the picture, and there's a couple songs in there that give you some feeling. And this just does none of that. So I'm leaving you, unfortunately, with a not so great album. I suppose I could do a bonus because actually this morning, another album by a band that also had a great first outing, great couple first outings, and then they feel like they kind of trailed a bit. Art Nation, they had an album come out called Transition. I don't even think it's supposed to be out today, but you know how that works with me. But it wasn't bad at all, but it also, nothing's living up really to that first album by Art Nation. So I mean, you could check out both of them if you've got thoughts on them. Let me know. I'll read your thoughts about this stuff. Same with anything on here. Like we talked about pro wrestling based on someone's email and so on. Happy to talk about this stuff. So anyway, okay, got you an extra long Q&A here. So we will wrap this baby up. Sorry you're not getting the best albums, but there's been so much great music in 2019. You've got a lot to cover of actually great, and I mean genuinely great, some of the best albums ever that have come out throughout this year. So do that. Anyway, that's it for this Wednesday Q&A. Lots more content even to come out in the remaining days of October 2019, and I will see all of you on the other side.